I need to explain a little background so what happened actually makes sense. I attend a public university in California, part of the UC system. Some campuses, like UCLA or Berkeley, are massive. Others, like mine, are much smaller. Every year, most of the bigger schools host what's officially called a welcome tour day for incoming students. Unofficially, though, it's just an excuse for all-day chaos and non-stop parties. Berkeley has Cal Day. Santa Barbara has Deltopia. My campus is about 2.5 hours away from UCSB, and even though I've never been much of a party person, it was my senior year. I knew this would be my last chance to experience something like this. So when my friends invited me to Deltopia, I said screw it and agreed to go. We left Friday afternoon, the day before things really kicked off. Hunter was driving, and packed into the car with me were Damon, Benjamin, and Armin. All of us are over 6 feet tall, so the ride was cramped and uncomfortable, but the conversation and music made the time fly. When we finally reached Isla Vista, we spent nearly an hour driving in circles looking for parking. I'm not exaggerating. That's how insane Deltopia gets. Just when we were about to give up, Hunter somehow convinced a sorority girl to let us use her assigned parking spot. That alone felt like a small miracle. Hunter's sister was a junior at UCSB, and she'd agreed to let us crash on the floor of her apartment. During Deltopia, having a place to sleep is worth more than gold. She and her roommates were relaxed and welcoming, so even though the main event didn't start until the next morning, we decided to drink and hang out that night. There's something important you need to know about Hunter. He's friendly to a fault. Because of that, he knows a lot of people, including a guy named Amir. Calling Amir a friend is generous. He's the type of person who latches onto social groups without ever really belonging. Loud, insecure, desperate for attention. And somehow always the center of every conversation. Worse than that, he'd done some genuinely messed up things to people I cared about in the past. At some point before the trip, Amir mentioned to Hunter that he was also going to Deltopia. There was never any plan to meet up, no discussion about where he'd stay. He wasn't part of our group. About an hour after settling into the apartment, the 5 of us walked to a liquor store. As we were leaving, bags in hand, I noticed someone standing alone on the curb. It was Amir. None of us said anything. We just kept walking. Amir fell in step beside us like this was completely normal, like he'd been with us the whole time. A few blocks later, he finally spoke. "Why are you guys acting surprised to see me?" Of course we were surprised. There was no plan, no invitation. As far as we knew, he didn't even know where we were staying. We ignored him and kept walking, unsure how to deal with the situation. Things escalated fast once we reached the apartment. Amir asked to use the bathroom. Hunter hesitated, but eventually agreed. The moment the door opened, Amir rushed ahead of us. Hunter's sister answered, and Amir immediately said, "I'm staying here," before walking straight past her. She didn't know any better and assumed he was with us. Hunter realized instantly that Amir had lied. He was furious. I won't go into every detail, but the bottom line is this. Hunter told him directly that he wasn't welcome, that lying to his sister crossed a line, and that he needed to leave. Amir refused at first. He argued outside the door for nearly 20 minutes before finally giving up and walking away. Later that night, while we were drunk and laughing about the situation, we realized something disturbing. Hunter had been sharing his iPhone location with Amir. That's how he found us. The next day was exactly what people hyped Deltopia up to be: chaotic, loud, and unforgettable. By late afternoon, we were exhausted and back at the apartment, with 5 more friends. While filling them in on what happened, one of them, Rylan, mentioned that he might still have Amir's location. He checked his phone. His face went pale. The blue dot was right on top of us. The moment we said his name out loud, the dot started moving. Fast, like someone driving away. We laughed it off. We shouldn't have. That night, long after everyone passed out, I woke up suddenly. A loud crash echoed from the living room, glass shattering. Everyone else was dead asleep. I grabbed an empty wine bottle, my heart pounding, and slowly moved toward the noise. The sliding glass door to the balcony was destroyed. A large rock sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by shards of glass. I knew instantly it was Amir. I turned to wake everyone, and that's when I saw the closet door handle twitch. I froze. I nearly pulled the door open, until something stopped me. Instead, I quietly went back and woke Hunter. When we returned to the living room, the closet door was open. Hunter reached inside and pulled out a large kitchen knife. Amir had been hiding behind that door with a weapon. If I had opened it, I don't think I'd be alive today. We called the police. A report was filed. Nothing else came of it. By morning we left. Before driving away, Hunter tried to send Amir a message. It never delivered. We had all been blocked. None of us ever heard from him again. I still think about it. Story 2. This happened a long time ago, but I remember most of it with unsettling clarity. It was late April of 1996. I had just finished basic training and was assigned to an airbase in San Angelo, Texas, as a communications specialist. I was 24 years old, and honestly, Texas felt like freedom to me. I grew up in Mississippi, and one of the main reasons I enlisted was to put as much distance between myself and home as possible. At the base, I became close with two people pretty quickly, a guy everyone called Seabass, and a woman named Kay. The three of us did almost everything together. Off duty, on duty, it didn't matter. One warm weekend in early spring, Seabass suggested we take a day trip to Austin. Kay and I were sick of the same routine on base, so we agreed immediately. Kay offered to drive, and later that afternoon we loaded her SUV and hit the highway. About an hour into the drive, we were cruising along a mostly empty stretch of road when Seabass spoke up from the back seat. "Have you noticed the vehicle behind us?" I turned around and saw a dark SUV, maybe a Tahoe, following at a steady distance. I hadn't noticed it pulling out earlier, but I didn't think much of it at first. Kay changed lanes. The SUV followed. She did it again. Same result. Then the lights came on. Kay pulled over, assuming it was an undercover cop. That explanation made sense at first, until the driver stepped out. Something felt wrong immediately. He was dressed in black tactical gear, but there were no clear police markings, no badge, no visible nameplate. Just a small patch on his arm that I couldn't read. Instead of walking up to the driver's window like a normal officer would, he stood behind the SUV, silently observing. He peered through the back window, studying our bags. He looked over Kay's bumper stickers and examined her license plate closely. The longer he stood there, the more uncomfortable the silence became. Seabass eventually rolled his window down and asked if there was a problem. The man ignored him. Without a word, he walked up to Kay's window and asked for her license and registration. She handed them over, uneasy but compliant. The man walked back to his vehicle and stayed there far longer than any routine traffic stop should take. We whispered among ourselves, unsure whether we were overthinking things. Eventually, the man stepped out again. This time, two more men exited the SUV with him. My heart started racing. I forced myself to breathe slowly and stay calm. The original man approached Kay again and asked an odd question. "Is your father in the military?" Kay laughed and explained that the bumper sticker on her car was hers, that she was active duty. Then she pointed to Seabass and me and said we were too. The shift was immediate. The man stiffened. He glanced back at the other two men, then returned Kay's documents without another word. He told her to slow down and issued a warning. Then they all got back into the SUV and sped off. We sat there in silence, stunned. Seabass was convinced they weren't real cops. He kept saying something bad would have happened if we hadn't mentioned the military. None of us argued. Still, there was nothing we could do. We continued on to Austin and tried to enjoy the rest of the day. By the time we returned to base, the incident felt distant, like something strange but harmless. About a week later, Seabass and I were watching the local news when a story came on that made my stomach drop. A man and woman had been found dead in a ditch along a highway outside San Angelo. They had been robbed and murdered. The reporter mentioned that a vehicle had been discovered nearby, a black Tahoe. Police confirmed it had been stolen months earlier in another state. Seabass and I looked at each other and immediately went to find Kay. The three of us contacted police and told them everything we remembered about the stop. I still carry guilt for not reporting it sooner. To this day, I believe that bumper sticker saved our lives. I think about how easily that could have been us, pulled over on an empty highway mistaken for civilians and never making it home. I've always been a private person. That's why I waited so long to share this. But the thought of taking this story with me to the grave felt worse than the fear of telling it. Story 3. About 10 years ago, I was driving alone from West Patterson, New Jersey to Fort Worth, Texas. I was heading back to visit my parents, something I hadn't done in years. Life had pulled me away, and this trip felt long overdue. Somewhere deep into the drive, in a stretch of land that might have been Arkansas or the edge of Oklahoma, my car started acting strange. At first I tried to ignore it, but eventually the engine forced my hand. I pulled over onto the shoulder of a long, empty road. There was nothing around me, no gas stations, no houses, just fields, trees, and the sound of passing wind. I popped the hood and stared at the engine, pretending I knew what I was doing. In reality, I was just buying time before admitting defeat and calling for help. I didn't even have roadside assistance, which only made the situation more frustrating. A few minutes later, I heard tires crunch behind me. A white pickup truck had pulled over. The driver stepped out slowly. He looked to be in his mid-30s, maybe older, worn down in a way that made him hard to read. Curly hair, a long, uneven beard. He looked like someone who worked with his hands for a living. What unsettled me most was how similar he looked to me. Same height, similar build, even the same hair color, just rougher, less cared for. He didn't ask if I needed help, he assumed it. Before I could say much, he leaned over my engine like he knew exactly what he was doing. I explained what had happened and thanked him for stopping. He told me he was a mechanic, and based on how confidently he moved, I believed him. After a minute, his expression changed. He said the engine wouldn't start without a compression tester. According to him, it was the only way. Then he mentioned that a friend of his might be able to bring one out. I didn't question it. I had no reason to. He pulled out his phone, stared at the screen for a few seconds, then frowned. Said it was dead. Then he asked if he could borrow mine. I handed it to him without thinking. In one smooth motion, he took my phone and pulled a gun from his jacket. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rush. He simply told me to sit down on the shoulder and not do anything stupid. I did. Exactly what he said. The whole robbery felt disturbingly calm. He went through my pockets, took my wallet, my backpack, and even had me unlock my phone. Then he got back into his truck and drove away. Just like that. I'd been robbed on the side of the road. Eventually, another driver stopped and helped me get my car running. They even gave me directions all the way to Fort Worth so I wouldn't need my phone. I made it to my parents' house later that night, shaken but relieved. The following weeks were miserable. Canceling cards, replacing IDs, resetting passwords. I tried to move on. 6 months later, everything unraveled. Letters started arriving from banks I'd never used, new credit lines, maxed out store cards, charges from towns I'd never visited. That's when I remembered. My social security card had been in my wallet. The man who robbed me didn't just take my money, he took my identity. The next month was hell. My credit report was wrecked. I filed fraud reports, froze my credit, contacted police in multiple states. Nothing stopped it. Whoever was doing this was careful. Then my health insurance called. Someone had received emergency medical care under my name in Georgia. That was the breaking point. I became obsessed. I monitored credit reports, searched forums, set alerts for my name, and tracked every city connected to the fraud. One night I checked Craigslist. That's when I saw it. A listing in Jackson, Tennessee. Power tools. Electronics. Items that matched purchases charged to one of the fraudulent cards. I contacted the seller and kept things casual. Over several messages, we agreed to meet in a public place the next day. Instead of going myself, I called the local police. They remembered my case. When the seller showed up and noticed patrol cars nearby, he panicked and sped away. Officers followed him until he lost control and crashed into a ditch. During questioning, he folded quickly. He gave up the real thief. The man who robbed me wasn't alone. There were 3 of them. They'd been targeting stranded drivers across multiple states. All 3 were eventually arrested. Justice was served. But even now, when I pull over on an empty road, I don't trust anyone who stops to help. Some more stories. It was early June of 2017, and I was driving with my 9-year-old son, Tom, toward West Virginia to visit family. The trip was supposed to be simple, but it quickly became exhausting. My car's air conditioning was broken, and the heat was brutal. By the 6-hour mark, both of us were drained and irritable. We had left later than planned, so night had already fallen by the time we were still pushing down the interstate. Around 9 p.m., Tom started insisting he needed to use the bathroom. Urgently. Tensions were already high, and his repeated complaints turned into a short argument between us. It was about personal things I'd rather not explain, but by the end of it, neither of us was speaking. Not long after, I spotted a blue sign for a rest area and took the exit immediately. The rest stop was small and isolated, a single building with 2 bathrooms, a few benches, vending machines, nothing else. There were no other cars parked there except one large white pickup truck. I pulled up close to the building. Tom jumped out and ran inside without a word. I left the engine running knowing he'd be quick. We were still in that uncomfortable silence where no one knows what to say. About a minute later, I heard the rear door open, then close. I assumed it was Tom. I thought about saying something but decided against it. Instead, I pulled away from the rest area and merged back onto the highway. That's when I noticed the white pickup pulling out too. It followed me back onto the interstate and stayed close behind. I moved into the left lane, so did the truck. I sped up slightly, it matched my speed. Then the headlights began flashing. Thinking it was just an aggressive driver, I switched lanes again. The truck mirrored me. When I slowed down, the truck sped up and pulled alongside me. The driver rolled his window down and began shouting, pointing toward my back seat. I couldn't hear him clearly, but something about him made my skin crawl. He motioned urgently for me to pull over. My heart was pounding. I told Tom to stay calm, already preparing myself to hit the gas if anything went wrong. I pulled onto the shoulder. The pickup stopped behind me, partially on the grass, and the driver jumped out and ran toward my car. I shifted into drive, ready to flee. That's when he yelled, "Wait!" He reached my window and pointed inside. "That's not your kid." I froze. "What?" "That's not your kid who got into your car." Before I could process what he meant, the back passenger door opened. Someone stepped out. Not my son. A fully grown man bolted into the woods before I could even scream. I jumped out of the car yelling, but the stranger was already gone. Panic set in instantly. I thanked the pickup driver, without even thinking, spun the car around across the grass median and sped back to the rest area. The truck followed me. When we arrived, Tom was standing outside the bathroom, confused and unharmed. I nearly collapsed. I explained everything in a rush, barely able to breathe. The pickup driver backed me up, then quietly returned to his original parking spot. Tom was fascinated by what happened. I was deeply shaken. The rest of the drive, we talked non-stop. Whatever tension we'd had was gone. I never saw the face of the person who got into my car, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. Narrator: Arthi. Not long ago, my girlfriend and I took a road trip to California. The drive there was uneventful. We left early and arrived at our hotel by night. The drive home was different. We left midday, and most of the trip stretched deep into the night. It was a 10-hour drive without counting food stops. After our second late-night stop, around 12:30 a.m., we grabbed food from a Wendy's and got back on the freeway. I ate while driving, which my girlfriend hated. Shortly after, heavy rain started pouring down. She insisted I pull over immediately. As I parked on the shoulder, the rain turned violent. While I finished eating, something slammed against my window. At first, I assumed it was debris from the storm, until I looked left. A figure filled most of the window. My girlfriend screamed. I cracked the door open and shouted over the rain. It was a woman, soaked, shaking, and clearly distressed. She begged for a ride. Against my better judgment, I told her to get in the back seat. My girlfriend shot me a look I'll never forget. I asked the woman where she was going. No response. When I turned to look at her, she was already staring at me, expressionless, cold, wrong. I told both her and my girlfriend that I'd drop her off at the next town. That's when the screaming started. Without warning, the woman lunged forward and wrapped her arms around my neck. I slammed the brakes, nearly losing control. My girlfriend clawed at the woman's face, screaming. The woman howled in pain. I jumped out, yanked open the back door, and threw her into the rain. She collapsed, sobbing, repeating one word over and over. "Please." I drove away as she banged on the window, screaming like something feral. My girlfriend called the police. We didn't stop again until we reached home. Narrator: Arthi. In 2010, I drove my Ford F-150 from Pennsylvania to rural Georgia to visit family. 14 hours. One day. By 11:30 p.m., I was exhausted. The GPS led me off the highway onto narrow back roads. Thick woods surrounded everything, no houses, no lights. I turned onto an empty 2-lane road and pushed the speed, assuming no one else would be out there. Then I saw something reflective ahead, traffic drums. I slammed on the brakes. Behind them was a spike trap. I stepped out holding a baseball bat, confused and alarmed. That's when I heard a voice from the woods. Help! I refused to go in. As my headlights cut through the trees, I spotted movement. Someone crouched low. Then more figures appeared. I calmly returned to my truck, drove around the trap, and kept going. In my mirror, I saw at least 3 silhouettes standing by the drums before vanishing into the darkness. I never looked back. I made it out alive. I've told this story only a handful of times in my life, and every time I do, people ask the same question. Why didn't you call the police? The truth is, I didn't know what I had survived until it was already over. And by then, there was nothing left to report. This happened in late October 2014, during a stretch of my life when I was doing overnight freight runs across state lines, long drives, empty highways, cheap motels that smelled like mold and cigarettes. I'd been doing it for almost a year, and nothing had ever gone wrong. That made me careless. That night, I was driving from northern Ohio down toward rural Tennessee, hauling a small enclosed trailer with medical equipment. The pay was decent, but the schedule was brutal. I left just after sunset, planning to drive straight through and arrive before dawn. Around 1:40 a.m., my GPS rerouted me. There was construction ahead, or at least that's what it claimed. Instead of staying on the interstate, it guided me off onto a state road I'd never been on before. At first, it didn't seem strange. The road was paved, marked, and recently repainted. Trees lined both sides, thick and tall, their branches arching over the asphalt like ribs. Then the road narrowed. No shoulder, no streetlights, no houses, just forest. I checked my phone, no signal. I told myself it was fine. Rural routes lose signal all the time. I'd be back on the interstate soon. 30 minutes passed, then 40. The road twisted deeper into the woods, bending and dipping like it was avoiding something. I hadn't passed another car the entire time. That's when I saw the headlights. They appeared in my rearview mirror. Suddenly, too suddenly. One moment the road behind me was empty. The next, there they were, close, bright, a pickup truck. It followed me at an uncomfortable distance, never passing, never falling back. When I slowed, it slowed. When I sped up, it matched me. I didn't panic yet. Some people just drive like that. Then the truck turned off its headlights. The darkness behind me swallowed it completely. My grip tightened on the wheel. A few seconds later, the headlights came back on, closer than before. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe the driver was messing with their lights. Maybe it was a coincidence. Then my GPS spoke, recalculating route. The screen went blank, not frozen, not buffering, blank. The pickup's headlights flickered again, and that's when I noticed something else. There was no license plate, not obscured, not damaged, gone. My heart started to thud harder than it should have. I sped up. The truck sped up. I slowed down sharply, so did it. I pulled slightly toward the center line, testing. The truck drifted with me. That's when I realized it wasn't following the road. It was following me. Up ahead, I saw reflective orange shapes, construction barrels. Relief washed over me. Construction meant people, workers, a detour back to civilization. As I approached, my relief drained away. The barrels weren't blocking the road. They were arranged in a loose circle. In the middle of the road, I slowed to a crawl. There were no signs, no machinery, no lights, just the barrels, and something dark in the center of them. The pickup behind me honked. Once, sharp, commanding. I stopped. The engine idled loudly in the silence. The truck rolled closer, stopping just a few feet behind my trailer. Its driver's door opened. A man stepped out. At least, I think it was a man. He was tall. Too tall. His posture was wrong, like his joints didn't bend the way they should. He walked toward my driver's window slowly, hands visible, palms open. I cracked the window and... Inch. Road's closed, he said. His voice was flat. Not aggressive, not friendly, just empty. There's no sign, I replied. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying how my face worked. Turn the engine off. Every instinct in my body screamed no. I'll just turn around, I said. He smiled. Not with his eyes. You can't. Behind him something moved, near the barrels. I leaned forward, squinting. It looked like a person lying on the road. I felt sick. "Is someone hurt?" I asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he took one step closer to my window. "You've been driving a long time," he said. "You must be tired." I slammed the gas. The trailer jerked violently as I swerved around the barrels, barely missing the shape on the ground. In my headlights, I caught a glimpse of it. It wasn't a person. It was a pile of clothes. Empty. I heard shouting behind me. The pickup's engine roared to life. I didn't look back. The road ahead curved sharply, trees closing in. I floored it, praying I wouldn't lose control of the trailer. Branches scraped along the sides like fingernails. Then something hit the back of my trailer. Once, twice, hard. The impact nearly sent me spinning. In my mirror, I saw movement. Figures emerging from the trees, stepping onto the road, watching me pass. They didn't chase. They just watched. The road suddenly widened. Lights appeared ahead. A gas station. I burst into the parking lot, skidded to a stop under the canopy, and jumped out of the truck, screaming for help. The pickup never followed me in. The clerk inside called the police. When they arrived, I tried to explain everything. The truck, the barrels, the figures. They exchanged looks. One officer asked me to show them where it happened. We drove back together. The road was normal. No barrels, no tire marks, no clothes, no woods pressed close to the asphalt. Just a quiet, empty state road. They checked my GPS. It showed no reroute, no detour, no record of the road I'd driven on. The officer told me I was exhausted, that I'd imagined it. I wanted to believe him, until a mechanic inspected my trailer the next morning. There were dents along the back, deep ones, hand-shaped. I quit long-haul driving 2 weeks later, and I never drive rural roads at night anymore. Because somewhere out there, there's a road that doesn't exist, and it's waiting for someone tired enough to find it. I used to believe that if something bad was going to happen to you, there would be a clear moment when you realized it. A warning, a sign, something obvious enough that you could point to later and say that's when everything went wrong. That isn't how it happened to me. For me, it started with a kindness. In the winter of 2019, I was working a temporary contract job that required weekly travel between small towns in the Midwest. Nothing glamorous. Warehouses, inventory checks, overnight stays. I drove my own car to save money, which meant long hours alone on the road. Late February was the worst time for it. Snowbanks taller than cars, gray skies that never fully turned into night or day. Every town looked half abandoned. One night I was driving back from a town so small it didn't even have a motel. I'd finished my work late and decided to push through the 3-hour drive home instead of sleeping in my car. By the time I crossed the county line, it was just after midnight. The road was a 2-lane highway cutting through farmland. Flat, open, the kind of place where headlights feel like they're floating in an endless void. I hadn't seen another vehicle in nearly 40 minutes when I noticed something ahead. A car pulled off onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. I slowed instinctively. As I got closer, I could see it was an older sedan, hood popped open, steam curling into the freezing air. A figure stood beside it, hunched, arms wrapped tightly around their body. A woman. She looked young, maybe early 20s, wearing a thin jacket that wasn't nearly enough for the cold. I passed her. Then I kept driving, for about 10 seconds. Guilt hit me like a punch to the chest. I told myself what everyone tells themselves in those moments. What if that were someone you cared about? What if she freezes out here? I turned around. When I pulled up behind her car, she turned quickly, startled by the headlights. Her face was pale, eyes red, lips trembling from the cold. "Are you okay?" I asked through the window. "My phone's dead," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "I don't know what's wrong with it. I've been out here for almost an hour." I glanced at her car. No obvious damage, just steam from the engine. "I can call roadside assistance for you," I said. She shook her head. "I don't have coverage here. I just need a ride into town, anywhere with lights." I hesitated. Every warning I'd ever heard flickered through my head. But she looked genuinely scared. Freezing, alone. I unlocked the passenger door. She thanked me over and over as she climbed in, rubbing her hands together, breathing shakily. The car filled with the smell of cold air and something else I couldn't place. Metallic almost. We pulled away, her car disappearing into the darkness behind us. "What's your name?" I asked. "Lena," she said after a pause. I told her mine. For the first few minutes everything felt normal. She stared out the window, shoulders hunched, silent except for her breathing. Then she asked, "Do you always drive this road?" "No," I said. "Just for work." She nodded slowly. "You don't see many people out here," she said. "No," I agreed. She turned to look at me. Not just a glance, a long, searching look. "Good," she said quietly. Something about the way she said it made my skin tighten. I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, pretty empty." She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. A few miles later, I noticed something strange. The road signs. We should have passed a turnoff by now, one I'd taken dozens of times before, but the sign never came. Instead, the road kept stretching forward, straight and unbroken. I checked my GPS. No signal. The map showed a thin gray line with no labels, no town names, no landmarks. "That's weird," I muttered. Lena leaned forward slightly, peering at the screen. "This road changes," she said. I glanced at her. "What?" She leaned back again. Nothing. The temperature inside the car dropped, not the heater. It was still blowing warm air, but something else. A cold that felt deeper, heavier. I flexed my fingers on the steering wheel. "You said you just need a town," I said. "There should be one soon." She nodded again. "There will be." The way she said it felt like a promise she wasn't making to me. That's when I noticed her hands. They were filthy, dark smears under her nails, stains along her palms, like dried oil or dirt, or something worse. I tried not to stare. A few minutes later, she asked, "Do you live alone?" My chest tightened. "Why?" She shrugged. "Just making conversation. I have a roommate," I lied. She smiled again. "That's a shame." My heart started pounding. The road ahead dipped slightly, then rose. At the top of the rise, my headlights caught something standing in the road. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, stopping just feet away. It was another woman. She stood perfectly still, facing us. Same thin jacket, same posture, same face. I turned to Lena so fast my neck hurt. She was still in the passenger seat, smiling. "That's not possible," I whispered. The woman in the road lifted her hand and waved. Lena leaned closer to me. I could smell her now, copper and damp earth. "She's late," Lena said. I wondered where she'd gone. I fumbled for the door lock. Lena's hand closed around my wrist. Her grip was impossibly strong. "You were very kind," she said softly. "We appreciate that." The woman outside began walking toward the car. I yanked my arm free, threw the car into reverse, and floored it. The engine screamed as we shot backward down the road. Lena didn't scream. She didn't move. She just watched me. "You shouldn't do that," she said. "It makes it harder." I swerved violently. The car fishtailed. Lena's door flew open. She tumbled out onto the road. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove until the engine overheated and the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. I burst into the parking lot of a brightly lit truck stop, jumped out, and ran inside, shouting for help. People stared. Someone called the police. When officers arrived, I tried to explain. The woman, the road, the second one. They drove me back. The road was normal. The signs were there. They found a car on the shoulder. Hood open, engine cold, empty. No footprints in the snow except my tire tracks. No sign of Lena. No sign of the other woman. I was told I'd imagined it. Stress. Fatigue. A trick of the dark. I almost believed them. Until I cleaned my car the next day. On the passenger side floor mat, pressed deep into the rubber grooves, were handprints. Too large to be mine. And stained dark. I don't stop for stranded drivers anymore. I call for help. I keep driving. Because sometimes, what's waiting on the side of the road isn't broken down. It's just waiting for someone kind enough to stop. The call came in just after 1:40 a.m. Single driver reporting a disturbing encounter on County Route 17. Possible hallucinations. Possible assault. Caller extremely distressed. Those calls usually fall into two categories, drugs or exhaustion. I figured it was the latter. February nights out there are brutal. Flat land, no light pollution, long stretches where your brain starts filling in gaps that aren't really there. I was wrong. I met the caller at a truck stop near the interstate. He was sitting on the curb outside, wrapped in a thin jacket, shaking like he'd been dropped into ice water. Eyes wide, breathing fast. He kept looking past me, scanning the parking lot. "Sir," I said, kneeling down, "I'm Deputy Hollis. You're safe. Can you tell me what happened?" He tried. God knows he tried. But his words came out tangled. Two women, same face, one inside the car, one in the road, a grip strong enough to bruise bone. I checked his wrist. Purple fingerprints were already forming, too big to be his own. I exchanged a look with my partner, Ruiz. We both saw it. We drove him back to the reported location. County Route 17 was quiet, normal. Snow piled up along the shoulders, trees standing bare and black against the sky. The car was there. Older sedan, hood open, cold engine, no battery drain, no footprints, nothing broken. "Probably staged," Ruiz muttered, "or abandoned earlier." I wanted to agree. Then I saw the trunk. It was slightly open. Not enough to notice from the road, just enough that the latch hadn't caught. I approached slowly, hand on my holster. The smell hit me first. Rot. Sweet and metallic. I lifted the trunk. Inside were clothes, women's clothes. Several outfits folded neatly, stacked one on top of another. Jackets, shirts, scarves, all different sizes, all stained dark. Under them was a phone. Dead. Cracked screen. Still warm. "Ruiz," I said quietly. He stepped closer. We didn't speak for a moment. Because beneath the clothes were fingerprints, pressed into the carpet lining, too many, and beneath those, scratch marks, like someone had tried to claw their way out. We called it in. State police arrived, then detectives. The sedan was towed. The caller was sent home with instructions to rest and follow up. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd missed something. 2 nights later, I was back on that same road, not on duty, just driving. I told myself it was coincidence, shortcut, nothing more. It was around midnight again. Snow falling lightly. That's when I saw her, standing on the shoulder. Same thin jacket, same posture. Hazard lights blinking behind her. My stomach dropped. I slowed. She looked up. Her face, not the same, but close. Close enough that my hands tightened on the wheel. I remembered the trunk, the clothes, the scratches. I kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I saw her turn and watch me go. Then she smiled. The next morning, a report came in. Another driver, another roadside stop, another woman asking for help. This time, the driver never made it to a truck stop. His car was found abandoned 30 miles away. Passenger door open, no signs of a struggle, no blood, just handprints on the inside of the glass, and the smell. I pulled the case file. 3 similar reports over 5 years. Same stretch of road, same description, different faces, different names, always winter, always late, always someone kind enough to stop. They're not hitchhikers. They're not even one person. They're a system, a rotation. One breaks down, one gets in, one waits ahead, and they trade places. I requested reassignment after that. I don't patrol Route 17 anymore, but sometimes, driving home, I swear I see hazard lights flicker in the distance, and every time I do, I keep my eyes forward. Because whatever they are, they don't chase you. They wait, and sooner or later, someone always stops.